This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
This is a lecture on Chapter 8 and it's accounting for overheads. Now there's quite a lot in this chapter, and so we'll split into several lectures. But let's make a start. We mentioned in an earlier chapter a cost card. We need to work out the cost of what we're producing for several reasons. You can see there in the introduction. To value inventory, stocks. We need to know how much the units cost to produce. In order to decide on the selling price, we want the selling price obviously normally to be higher than cost. To analyse profitability, difference between selling price and the cost is the profit, but we need to know what the cost is. But there does stand to be a problem, and let me explain why with the first of several examples. If you look at example 1, X plc produces desks, and you'll see at the bottom it says calculate the cost per desk, and so we're going to produce a cost card. The dollars per unit. And let's list the costs. First of all, each desk uses 3 kilos of wood at a cost of $4 a kilo. Well, that's our materials. So the materials, what is it, 3 kilos? Each kilo costs $4. So a total of $12. Whoop. It takes 4 hours to produce, and labour is paid at the rate of $2 an hour. So labour, each unit takes 4 hours, it's $2 per hour, there's another $8. We've got fixed costs of production at $700,000. Now on the cost card we want all costs of production, so fair enough, materials, labour, they were easy, but we've got these fixed costs. And here's where we hit the problem. They're estimated to be 700,000, and I mentioned fixed costs in a previous chapter. That's things like the rent of the factory. And fine, the rent of the factory may be 700,000, but how are we going to decide how much it is per desk? Well, it says we expect to produce 50,000 desks a year, and so I don't think too much of a problem. The cost, 700,000 per annum per year. That'll be the cost in order to produce 50,000 desks per year. And therefore, how much does each desk effectively cost? 700,000 over 50,000, it's 14. The only problem, but one we'll discuss in a much later chapter, is that of course we're having to base this on estimates. We think fixed overheads will be 600,000 to 700,000, but of course they might end up being different. We think we're going to produce 50,000, but it might end up being different. And we can't wait to find out. We can't wait till the end of the year to find out the cost. I need to fix a selling price now. So I need to estimate the cost now. However, the fact that things may be different, that's another problem in a different chapter. But as a result, I end up with a cost per unit of $12, $20, $34, and there we are. Now that exercise of getting the fixed cost, dividing the total by the number of units, we say is absorbing overheads. It's charging overheads in the way we have done. And that $14 is called the overhead absorption rate. Here it's 14 per unit. Overhead absorption rate, overhead charging rate. We're charging the units with $14 fixed overheads. Okay, that's fine, and I hope not too much of a problem. But there are 2 problems that can occur. And if you turn over, the first problem is when we produce more than one product in the same factory. And let me explain why. Look at the question. X plc produces desks and chairs in the same factory, and at the bottom we want the cost per unit for desks and for chairs. We have two cost cards. Each desk uses 3 kilos of wood and takes 4 hours to produce. Each chair uses 2 kilos of wood and takes 1 hour to produce. Labour's paid at $2 an hour. Fixed cost 700,000. We're going to produce 30,000 desks, 20,000 chairs. Well, let's make a start. Let's start on our cost cards. Let me explain where the problem occurs. I'll do them side by side. So desks, chairs, dollars per unit. And it starts off easy enough, just like before. Desks, first of all, each desk uses 3 kilos of wood, so the materials, 3 kilos at $4 a kilo is 12. It takes 4 hours to produce, so the labour, 4 hours at, it says later, labour's $2 an hour, $2 is 8, so no problem. And similarly for chairs. Materials, here it's 2 kilos of wood at $4 a kilo is 8. It's 1 hour of labour. We're paying $2 an hour, so 2. So that bit's fine. If you remember earlier, that's the direct cost, the materials plus the labour. The problem is when we come to these fixed costs, the fixed overheads. We need to add on fixed overheads in each case. But how are we going to do it? You see, effectively it's the same as the last example in that the total overheads are 700,000 in the factory. But we are producing 2 products. And what I could do, but if you're copying this, don't copy this bit down. I could do what we did before and say, well, the total overheads are 700,000. How many units are we producing? 30 desks, 20 chairs, 50,000. And I could say, okay, that's 14 a unit and add on 14 in each case. Now I could do that. There's no sort of rules in management accounting. But I think that would be actually very unfair. We're talking about things like rent of the factory. But look at it. Each desk takes 4 hours to produce. It spends 4 hours in the factory. Each chair only spends 1 hour in the factory. So as I do say, there are no rules. It would seem unfair to charge them both with 14. Surely we should charge a desk with much more than we charge a chair. If it spends 4 times as long in the factory, perhaps we should give it 4 times as much of the rent or whatever these fixed costs are. And so what we tend to do, and this question tells us, it says absorb on a labour hour basis. What we're going to do is let's calculate how much it's costing us, these overheads, per hour. And if I know a cost per hour, then we can work out a cost per unit. Let me show you what I mean. We are going to need some workings. We know what the total fixed costs are, 700,000 for the year. I want to work out how much it's costing per hour. So let's work out how many hours we expect to work. We're producing 2 products, so desks. How many are we making? We're making 30,000 desks over the year. Each desk takes 4 hours. So we expect to spend 120,000 hours making desks. In addition, in the same factory, we're making chairs. 20,000 chairs. Each chair takes 1 hour. And so we're going to spend another 20,000 hours making chairs. So in total, we think we'll be working 140 hours. And so how much is it costing per hour? The cost per hour, $700,000. 140,000 hours is what? $5. And there is our overhead absorption rate. It's $5 per labour hour. And having done those workings, now we can go back to our costings and bring in the overheads, but we will charge them at $5 an hour. So desks, each desk, remember, took 4 hours to produce, and so at $5 an hour, we'll charge overheads of 20. Each chair took 1 hour of labour, and at $5 an hour, we'll charge 5. As a result, the total cost of a desk, 20 is $40, of a chair is 15. And surely that's a lot fairer than charging an equal amount to each. If desks take 4 times as long in the factory, we ended up charging 4 times the cost. And the exam will tell you what to do. I say again, there's no rule. We're allowed to absorb per unit. More commonly, we absorb on a labour hour basis, or sometimes it would be on a machine hour basis in exactly the same sort of way. What's the cost per machine hour? And then charge it. Okay, so that's one problem. There's a second one. Look on I think it's the 3rd page, section 4. The second problem is when we've more than one department in the factory. So look at example 3 with me. XPLC produces desks and chairs in the same factory. We've 2 departments, assembly and finishing. So maybe in the assembly department we actually build the desks and the chairs, but then they move to finishing. And maybe that's where they get painted. Each desk uses 3 kilos of wood and takes 4 hours to produce, same as before. But those 4 hours, 3 hours are in the assembly department and 1 hour in the finishing. Each chair takes 2 kilos of wood and takes 1 hour to produce, exactly as the previous example, but that 1 hour, half an hour is in assembly and half an hour is in finishing. Labour's paid at the rate of $2 an hour. Fixed costs of production are $700,000, just as before. And further down, we're going to produce 30,000 desks and 20,000 chairs. So it's basically the same question as before. And last time I did labour hours, I said, oh, it's $5 per hour. The difference here is because we've 2 separate departments, would it not perhaps be fairer to calculate a cost per hour in the assembly department and separately a cost per hour in the finishing department? All we've done in the previous one is work out a cost per hour for the whole factory. Let's have a go at working out a cost per hour in each department separately. And there are 2 departments, assembly and finishing. And so to get a cost per hour, we'll have to work out what is the cost in each department, how many hours in each department, and therefore a cost per hour. Let's do it. First of all, let's split the costs. I'll split them between these 2 departments, assembly and finishing. And what does it say about the costs? It says the fixed cost of production is $700,000. Of this total, $100,000 is the salary of the supervisors. So supervisors, $100,000. And how are we going to split that? Well, it tells us the assembly supervisor is paid 60,000, the finishing supervisor 40. So that's easy. If we know what the cost is in each bit, we stick it in each bit. The remaining overheads, well, how much is remaining? Remember, the total is 700,000. We've just dealt with 100, so there's 600,000 remaining. And it says the remaining overheads, the rest of them, for some reason we've decided to split them. 40% to assembly, which is 240,000. 60% to finishing, oops, I missed a zero, which is 360,000. And so we've managed to split the 700. We say that 300,000 of it is the assembly department. 400,000 is finishing. Now, before I carry on, just one little bit of terminology, just in case it's mentioned. Supervisors, we put the cost where relevant. We say we allocated the cost. Allocating overheads. If you know it's one department, you stick it there. The others, though, we just decided to share them. I don't know why we decided 60%, 40%, 60%, but we shared them. We call that apportionment. It means sharing. So it's a minor point, but just in case the words are mentioned ever in the exam, allocating when you know where the cost is, apportioning when you're simply sharing it between departments. However, why am I doing this? We know the cost in each department. I want to work out the cost per hour in each department. So let's now work out how many hours we're working. Desks, we're making 30,000, remember. And if you look back, it says they spent 3 hours in assembly. So 30,000 at 3 hours, they spent in total 90,000 hours in assembly. They spent 1 hour in finishing. Well, 30,000 desks, 1 hour. It'll be 30,000 hours in finishing. What about chairs? We're making 20,000 chairs. And it says they take an hour to produce, half an hour in assembly. Well, 20,000, half an hour is 10,000 hours. And half an hour in finishing. So again, 10,000 hours. So in total, we're working 100,000 hours in assembly, 40,000 in finishing. So now we can work out the absorption rate. The overhead absorption rates. What's the cost per hour in each department separately? In assembly, 300,000, 100,000 hours work. It's $3 per hour. And what about finishing? 400,000 for 40,000 hours work. It's costing $10 per hour. So see what we've done. I'll do the cost cards in a moment. Whereas in the last example, we just had an hourly rate for the whole factory. Here I can perhaps be a bit more precise, and I've worked out a separate hourly rate for each of the two departments. And so now let's do our cost cards. Desks, chairs. Material, well, as before, 3 kilos of wood, $4 a kilo, so desks are 12. Chairs, 2 kilos, $4 a kilo, 8. Exactly as before. And similarly, labour. In total, a desk takes 4 hours and labour's paid $2 an hour, which is 8. Chairs take 1 hour. At $2 an hour is 2. So that's not the problem. But when we come to these fixed costs, now we'll use these absorption rates. So what about desks? Desks, they spend 3 hours in assembly, and assembly is $3 per hour, a total of 9. They spend 1 hour in finishing. Finishing is $10 an hour, 10. So the total overheads we'll give to chairs this time, desks rather, this time is 19. And we get a total cost of $39 a unit. What about chairs? They spend half an hour in assembly, where it's $3 an hour. Assembly is $3, so $1.50. They spend half an hour in finishing, and finishing is $5 an hour. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Finishing is $10 an hour, so half an hour at $10 is 5. A total of $6.50. And so what's the cost per unit for chairs? $16.50. And there we are. And surely that is fairer. You know, I've said several times already, there are no rules for management accountants. We do what we think is most sensible, most useful. But do see what's happened here, that if we've several departments, it makes sense, if we can, to work out an absorption rate, a cost per hour for each department separately. When we've got this absorption rate, then we can do our cost cards and charge the overheads depending on how many hours they spend in each department. Well, over the page is a slightly longer example of the same sort of idea. If you're happy with what I've done, then have a go yourself at example 4, but regardless, I'll go through it in the next lecture, and then we'll take it a little bit further.